for some analysts and stakeholders concerned, it was seen coming. For others, it was unexpected. The Osun State Election Petition Tribunal has sacked Ademola Adeleke as the governor of the state and declared Boyiga Oyetola as the winner of the July 16 governorship election in the state. Justice Tessa Kume, who delivered the majority judgment, declared that the Independent National Electoral Commission did not comply substantially with the provisions of the Constitution and the Electoral Act. Meanwhile, Governor Adeleke vowed to challenge the judgment at the Court of Appeal, describing it as miscarriage of justice. Earlier, December, BKO bared his mind on this issue.
What we have seen in Osun is that we have to shine our eyes as a people. Because this BVAS, we felt that BVAS was the silver bullet that will put an end to election rigging in our country. But the facts coming out of Osun are really startling, and I'm worried. I'm worried for the 2023 election because if in Osun alone we can have this quantum of overvoting, the APC in Osun are saying that overvoting happened in 747 polling centers. It is for the tribunal to determine whether that is true. It is for the tribunal to determine whether the quantum of overvoting had such a big bearing on the outcome, on the final outcome.
Yeah.
But some of what came out of the tribunal suggests clearly that there was overvoting. And then the question you ask is, what is going on? What role did BVAS play in this whole thing? In Ede South, for example, accreditation figure was 830. But in the BVAS report, the figure of accreditation was 793.
Yeah.
Okay. That's in Ward 4, Unit 7, Ede South. The figure of accreditation in the BVAS report was 313, while the result on Form EC8A was 383. What we will expect to see is that whatever is captured by BVAS
is gospel.
Yes.
Yes, Jide, this is another low for the electoral election umpire in the country. Very low, very low. Because we did not expect. In Yaga Africa just submitted the report now, election manipulation propensity index, reporting that it's likely that 22 states out of 36 states elections might be manipulated in those 22 states, and they came out with the fact if an off-season election like this in Osun State took place and INEC had to go ahead to declare a winner outside the number of registered voters that was outlined.
Accredited voters.
The accredited voters.
It's very shameful. It's very shameful that 744 polling units experience overvoting. This is election in just 10 local governments. 744 polling units overvoting happened. The election that took place in Osun was a scam. No doubt about it. Now, why do we have BVAS? BVAS is backed by law. It is our electronic accreditation module. For now, that is the electronic accreditation module. Backed by law, I insist again, backed by law.
2022 Electoral Act.
Yes. Now, if BVAS accredited 300 voters in a polling unit, and you go ahead to, in your result, you went to Form EC8A, and you wrote that 383.
Contrary to what?
That means something is wrong. What you have in Form EC8A which is the analog
Yes. Our old way.
analog form,
Election results.
on which results are written must tally with the findings of BVAS.
You must ensure that.
But that was not what we saw in Osun. I have always warned that BVAS, that these politicians will bypass BVAS using their agents within the electoral body. This is clearly what we saw. Now, to make matters worse, INEC could not convince the court, the tribunal, that there was no overvoting. What INEC tried to do was to try and protect itself, but it failed. I will explain how they tried to protect themselves. After the case was instituted, Governor Itola's lawyers asked for the BVAS report. I think they were convinced from the beginning that some of the figures emanating from the polling units were not real. So they asked for the BVAS report, knowing that the BVAS could not be manipulated. But the form EC8, it is still your hand that you will use to write the figure. So that can be manipulated. They asked for the BVAS report. And when the BVAS report came, it showed clearly that overvoting had taken place in 744 polling units.
Substantially affecting the outcome.
That is huge. And the votes that we are talking about here amounted to 115,000. Those are the votes deducted from the outcome. So you can imagine a situation in which 115,000 votes were unreal, manufactured.
That would have given undue advantage.
Manufactured. So when the PDP candidates' lawyers asked for, they too now asked for BVAS report. INEC now came up with a second BVAS report and claimed that it was yet to synchronize the entry in BVAS with the entry in the form EC8A. But the Electoral Act does not recognize anything like synchronization of what's in the BVAS with what is in the form EC8A. What the Electoral Act recognizes and validated by Section 60 of the Electoral Act is that BVAS shall be the module by which you shall accredit voters. So whatever BVAS says, as far as the Electoral Act is concerned, is the gospel truth. So unfortunately for them, even when they presented the so-called report, the second report, naturally there should have been only one BVAS report. But Nigerians being who we are, they came up with a second BVAS report. Even when they came up with that second BVAS report, the Oyetola's lawyers were still able to identify discrepancies. They were still able to prove overvoting even in the second BVAS report.
And both parties agreed.
Yes, and at the end of the day, INEC, whose responsibility it was to give us a free and fair, credible election, was complicit. Complicit, mark my word, complicit. And I say this with a high sense of responsibility. INEC was complicit in the manipulation of the election in Osun in a manner that should worry Nigeria. You know, I said it, that I was worried for future elections. But at the end of the day, we have to admit that BVAS did its work. It is human interference now that appeared to give BVAS a bad name because they were the ones who came up with a phony second BVAS report. And what did the judges say? The judges said, when you presented the APC with that BVAS report, you didn't tell them that it was temporary. That was the result upon which you declare the winner. How could you then come and manufacture another report? And then BVAS, by its nature, does not upgrade itself. What it has entered is there. It's not subject to manipulation. So, to me, INEC could not prove that overvoting didn't take place. And the law is clear. The law says wherever there is evidence of overvoting, the election in those places shall be cancelled. 744 polling units had their elections cancelled. That was consistent with the dictates of the law.
This will change the fragile political atmosphere in Osun State.
Beyond Osun, beyond that, it will change the political atmosphere in Nigeria. Because I tell you, see, what happened in Osun, first, let me quickly start by saying it's actually a victory for BVAS. I've seen a lot of arguments. The main victor in the Osun debacle is BVAS. And how? At the end of the day, it is BVAS that was able to help the parties establish that they were overvoting. In the absence of BVAS, if we were to be using the whole voters register system, they will get away with this as usual. Now, what happened in Osun was simple. And it points to the fact, like BKO said, as long as we continue to have human interferences, whatever technology we are bringing will still not give us the right result. But BVAS must not be done away with. It is what we need. It is to accredit, and the law backing BVAS made this easy. The Electoral Law 2022 shows that the only acceptable means of accreditation is BVAS. Now, what the PDP lawyers were trying to prove in Osun is that in some places, BVAS did not work. So they resorted to using voters register. And the tribunal told them it is unacceptable.
Against the Electoral Act.
And INEC,
That's
the complicity,
2011 law.
the complicity of INEC is in allowing such. But I covered the Osun election. On this program, I said it when we came back that we saw where electoral officers were forced to allow people who were not accredited to vote. You must also understand
Whereas
that
their own rule book says that
it should not happen.
Never.
But in some cases, they accepted under duress because the atmosphere was tense, charged. Now, I'll give you an instance where the chairman of a local government came with his aides, about 20 of them, and only 3 or 4 of them passed the BVAS test. And at the end of the day, they proceeded to vote, and a system was deployed that, okay, put them on the voters register. Contrary to, so you have about 18 people already voting as against what is in BVAS. So you discover a situation where either by under duress or under influence, people agreed to bypass what the law says. But it is good that the tribunal, backed by 2020 electoral law, can look the perpetrator in the face and say, look, you failed. And that's why we should give credit to BVAS.
Right.
INEC should try and clean up its house.
I just want to add something. You know, in some of the previous off-season elections that we've had, I complained that where some polling stations where voting was characterized by violence, INEC officials, I'm talking about Kogi and Bayelsa, INEC officers still returned votes.
But if you look at the law,
they return results from those areas.
BKO, the law 2022 election also make it clear that INEC cannot deduct votes. Okay. That's where the contradiction is. Even if INEC declares this thing, they can't deduct the votes.
Let's now bring in via Zoom Barrister Ibrahim Lawal, a lawyer, to discuss this matter. Thank you for staying with us.
Yes, my pleasure to join you.
What do you make of this judgment by the Osun State Electoral Tribunal?
Well, my conclusion about this judgment is that it shows clearly that the impression we have about BVAS as the beginning and end of our electoral problem is far from being resolved. The judgment has clearly shown that if the umpire, the INEC, are not ready to be an impartial umpire, we continue to have problem with the electoral system. The judgment also showed to us that there is nothing wrong with BVAS. In fact, BVAS is very important in our electoral system if you want to get it right. But people who will handle BVAS must, be alive to their responsibility. They must be faithful to the spirit and letters of the law. That's what the implication of the judgment. Judgment has clearly shown that beyond the package of declaration, the real winner of the election had been shown. The judgment is like a VAR in a football, while INEC is the referee, the tribunal is the VAR in this circumstance, and we have been able to clearly see who the actual winner is in that election.
Okay, let's look at the minority judgment. What are your takeaways from the minority, the 8-page minority judgment?
The dissent.
Well, if you look at the minority judgment, these have been the majority judgment. The minority judgment dwell in the past. Most of the authorities cited and agreed by the dissenting member of the tribunal are authorities that are related to 2011 Electoral Act. And the majority judgment actually captured that and gave answers to those questions, because they said in their judgment that that was in the realm of the past. You do not, because the insistence of the minority judgment that improving overvoting, you must tender voter register. The majority judgment says no, that under the new dispensation, you need not, tender voters register, because voter register is not necessary in declaring or in finding out overvoting. So those are his takeaway, that the petitioner has failed to give substantial evidence, to prove overvoting. While Section 137 of the Electoral Act is very clear about the document, that the tribunal has the power to look at the document tendered before it, read it, investigate it, and draw conclusion out of it. So as far as I'm concerned, the 8-page dissenting judgment has not done justice as the majority judgment, the 108-page judgment has done. It has, in fact, answered a lot of questions thrown by the dissenting judgment. So it is an unencompassing judgment that had answered issues thrown up by the dissenting judgment.
Now, let's also talk about the second BVAS report that INEC issued.
Yes.
By any chance, do you see the upper courts, especially the superior courts, or especially the final court, do you see them accepting the right of INEC to come up with a second BVAS report in the course of the trial?
Interestingly, we don't even need to discuss the other BVAS report, because even the respondents disowned that BVAS report. Their contention is that the report that the court should rely on should be the one they went to do themselves. They ran away from even the synchronized BVAS report. That is even the irony of the case. The second and third respondents, the candidates and the party, said they do not also believe the synchronized BVAS report, because we have been able to show, even from the synchronized report, a lot of overvoting embedded in it. There are discrepancies between the synchronized BVAS report and even the reports of inspection they said they went to do with BVAS machine. And we have been able to, so having realized that the two did not go along together, they disowned INEC and said that the court should focus attention on the inspection they did, which they gave their agents who they paid to go and do inspection and bring out results and copy exactly what was in the Form EC8A and represent that as the accreditation, that the same thing that is contained in Form EC8A is the same that is contained in accreditation. Secondly, there is no court of the land that will believe the story of synchronization. One, in the Electoral Act, there is nothing like synchronization. Two, when the petitioner asked for the BVAS report of the election conducted on 16th July 2022, they were obliged that report, and they also certified and said what they gave to us is an accurate account of accreditation on that day. It was even on the basis of that report that results were declared and winners were declared, results were released and winners declared in that election. The other one, and the court rightly put it in the judgment, that as far as they are concerned, the second BVAS report was an afterthought. After they have received a petition, they now made another BVAS report in August, and that they said that the one released to us, were released before synchronization. Meanwhile, on the face of that document, there was nothing like synchronization. They did not at any point in time write to withdraw that one as inchoate. They never did. What they went to do was to go and prepare another document in order, to rubbish the ones they are giving us, and the judgment said, the tribunal said that action of INEC is reprehensible, that they made attempts, to distort, official documents. That was what they said in that ruling, in the judgment. So there is no way they could any court.
Okay, Barrister,
would overrule that position.
all right.
I was okay, it's good.
Dari.
Okay, I was going to ask, there is this other argument on the part of the respondent that in a situation where there is even overvoting and is established, is it right that the tribunal should have called for re-election, as in cancel the election and other fresh election?
Let me also add this one so that you have time to explain it. There's a part that the judge was quoted as saying that Governor Adeleke, he referred to the song of Kiss Daniel, that we should not buga. I want you to talk about that. Did he go outside his brief? Was that abnormal?
The language used.
The language used?
The outside legal acceptability.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. The Electoral Act is very clear. When there is an overvoting, it defines what is an overvoting. An overvoting is when the votes cast in a particular polling unit is more than the accredited voters. The law empower the presiding officer to cancel result of that polling unit. What the petitioner has challenged is 744 polling units out of 3,000 and something, over 3,000 polling units in Osun. The required number is still there. The spread, 2/3 majority that you must have is still there, even when those 744 votes is taken out of the votes. If you have enough to still make them declare you as a winner, there is no need or no recourse for another election. If the challenge has been to like 12 local government, 11 local government, 30 local government, that the winner had fallen short of the requirement of the law as to declaration as a winner. But because even with the taking out of the votes that are nullified by virtue of discovery of overvoting, the votes that are that remains is still enough for the winner to be declared and the certificate of return to be issued to the winner. So it is not true that in all cases that fresh election will have to be ordered. It depends on whether they have met the constitutional threshold as to warrant that person being declared as a winner. Secondly, judgment of courts are reflections of happening in the society. If you read judgments in the past, allusions are made or quotations are made from Macbeth, from literature. And that is why to study law, one of the requirements is that you must have literature in English.
Yes.
Reference are made, and that's what we call obiter dictum when judges write judgment. So you see a lot of allusions to literature, to work of art, even to music in some cases, for lawyers and for judges to drive home their point. It is just to embellish and has nothing to distract, from the judgment.
Yes.
And the context by which the judge used the word the King Daniel's son is to drive home the point that as at the time the man is celebrating his victory, it is not yet time because he did not score the majority of votes. That's what he was trying to put across in that judgment. It's not as if he has used that to deride anybody. Section 53(2) of the Electoral Act is very clear. He said where the votes cast at an election in any polling unit exceed the number of registered voters in that polling unit. That is the old law that the other dissenting judge was trying to say. But in this one said where the number of votes cast at an election in any polling unit exceed the number of accredited voters in that polling unit, the presiding officer shall cancel the result of the election in that polling unit. That is section 51(2) of this current Electoral Act. Unlike 2011, where you have to take, together, you have to take into consideration the number of registered voters.
Yes.
So, like I was saying, the issue of making allusion to poem, to poetic language, to music, to novels is not novel in the circumstance. And what is more, the reference to Buga in that judgment is not the first time the reference will be made. There is a case at NIC, National Industrial Court, where the judge also made reference to Buga song in his judgment. So judges make use of things like that to drive home their point. So it is not novel at all, and it does not detract from the judgment. That's what I'm trying to put across to you, that it has nothing to do with the judgment or the bias or sentiment as some people want us to believe. It has nothing to do with it.
Okay, Barrister, let's talk about the Adeleke team. What was the main kernel of their own defense at the tribunal? What was the main kernel of their defense in trying to affirm that they indeed won the election? What arguments did they bring forward?
Well, their own kernel of defense is that, as far as they are concerned, recall that there was no overvoting, contrary to the report we brought. Their own defense is that our own BVAS report is incorrect, and that the BVAS report that INEC brought supersedes our own. That was even their defense in the first place.
That's the second BVAS report.
The second BVAS report supersedes our own.
Oh, okay.
That's their own issue, because according to them, synchronization took place. And because they want to say that they use more than 2 BVAS machines in some polling units. But the Electoral Act is very clear. A situation where you can use more than 1 BVAS machine only when there is the first BVAS is 40. That is when they said they should bring another one to replace it. There is no evidence to show that in any polling unit there was breakdown of a BVAS machine. No reports, no INEC reports, and we said so practically, which put a lie to their defense. Secondly, having saw the futility, when we now did cross-examination and they realized that we have been able to put a lie to even the second BVAS report, they brought in a report of inspection. Even the physical inspection done by INEC and even the witness for the second respondent also contradicts one another. It is stated in those judgments. If you take time to read those judgments, the tables were there. The majority judgment, the chairman or the tribunal judgment clearly showed those discrepancies in those reports. Interestingly, we have like 3 reports, apart from the one they gave to us in one election. So their reports, first respondent, INEC, second respondent, third respondent, did not agree with one another. And that was the problem with their evidence. And where there are, discrepancies in evidence, no court what is sought will believe such evidence. And that was what happened to them. Even during the final address, they abandoned INEC completely and said that the court should not look at any of the BVAS. So the thing now becomes this parable of 2 women who are laying claim to one son, to a baby, and they were before King Solomon, and the first one said they should kill the baby so that all of them could do. The other one said they can give the baby to the other one, they should not kill. In this case, they said the court should not believe any of the BVAS reports, whether synchronized or the ones they said was not synchronized, but believe in the physical inspection they went to do themselves.
Okay, let's.
And it is our contention that.
Right, sir. Let's.
It is our contention that.
Let's talk about another issue that people have not really put so much accent on. That is the matter of forgery. The 3 judges appeared or agreed that Adeleke actually forged his secondary school certificate.
Yes.
I was thinking that since that in itself, by law, is a basis for disqualifying a candidate, I was wondering why the Oyetola legal team did not try to use that, did not sit on that.
No, we do. You see, in our in our grant of petition, our first grant is that the candidate, the second respondent, did not qualify to contest as at the time of election because he presented a forged certificate. It was on the basis of our own that the rules that we are able to prove forgery. But the tribunal somersaulted by saying that because he has some other certificate other than the secondary school that he is still qualified. That is also a subject of cross appeal to us because we believe that having proved forgery and the courts, the tribunal also find as a fact that there was indeed forgery and that forgery had been proven, then we are entitled to have judgment in our favor. And we are going to test it at the higher court. We are happy that our issue of forgery we brought before them was also affirmed by them that there was indeed a forgery of O level. And our contention is that if the base is wrong, whatever you put on it cannot stand. You can't put something on nothing and expect it to stand. If you say somebody has forged the document, and somebody who forged be seen to be a governor.
I want to thank you for your intervention, Barrister Ibrahim Lawal. Thank you. Thank you for that intervention.
Much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Jide, days ahead, thank God that we have the Electoral Act over time since 1999. It has been amended. This same Osun State, it took Rauf Aregbesola 48 months to actually get his mandate back. So
and
those
the
days,
circumstances are similar.
yeah, those days we won't experience those days again. Now it started back. We have 180 days for the tribunal level and the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. Ultimately, before the end of this year, this case will be resolved.
Hopefully in 60 days, the appeal court has to come up with a judgment. And then in another 60 days, hopefully the Supreme Court will come up. So by the middle of the year, this whole thing will be laid to rest. It's not even...
Interesting.
We are not looking like maybe September. No, by the middle of the year, this matter will be laid to rest. The people have voted, they deserve to see the person they voted for.
On the flip side, we had protests from the part of the Adeleke people protesting that they voted for Adeleke.
Yes.
What is the court talking about?
I mean, that shows the frailties of man. Because I was quick to take those who were doing that back to 2018. Adeleke won in the tribunal against Oyetola. He was declared the winner by the tribunal. Although he went on to lose at the appeal and at the Supreme. But there were no protests and killings and attacks at that point. So I think it is too early for anybody to cry wolf.
Yes.
The tribunal has established facts as presented to it. The laws that empower the tribunal to look into it also empowered the respondent to move to a higher court if he is not satisfied. So they should await the outcome. And then I was happy that while people were protesting, some people were rejoicing. That shows balance. Just like people, PDP supporters, there were celebrations, even in Osogbo, Ilesha. We saw visuals of celebrations, just like we were seeing visuals of protest. So that cancels themselves out. However, the resolve to violence by any of the parties is uncalled for. It can only spoil the case judiciary of the person they appear to be defending, because the court of public opinion is equally strong. The appeals will go on. Go and, if you believe in prayer, be praying. And finally, if you need to make your legal team stronger, do.
On the final note, a lot of people will say that, look, INEC should make sure that they do their job very well, so that it's not the judges in courts that will be adding and subtracting votes to present governors. That INEC should make sure that
nobody is adding Nobody's adding any vote. It's just people who feel pained that are coming up with this argument. No vote has been added. The judges,
The tribunal did not conduct
the judges
election.
have merely done what the law stipulates.
Yes.
Where there is overvoting, elections in such a polling unit will be cancelled. It's there in the Electoral Act.
Yes.
So the judges have done nothing outside of the law. So people worry themselves, they bother themselves about the fact that courts are stepping in to do what politicians did not allow to happen, where people willfully rig elections. Thank God we have the courts to say, look, you willfully rig this election, therefore, your wish will not come to pass. That's what
you will not benefit from your own crime.
Yes, that is what the courts are there for. A situation in which somebody is cheated, somebody should have won a primary election, is cheated, and the court steps in and says, look, this is the rightful winner. That cannot be wrong if we like justice. But the point with our people is, where it does not favor you, then you will start ranting.
It is injustice.
When it happened in Bayelsa,
It is victory for democracy.
people were happy. They said, the judges, the judiciary has shown that is the last hope of the common man. Where it happened in Zamfara, they said, the judiciary is the last hope of the common man, is best. Where the shoe finds itself on the wrong foot, that's when you start hearing stories. I think it was Timmy Frank who said, oh, those judges should face the judges of Osun Tribunal should face NJC. For what? For delivering judgment using the law. If you felt that the judgment of those judges was wrong, you go to a superior court. It's as simple as that. You can't be calling for their investigation.
And then the judicial aspect of it is also part of the electoral law.